Governor Peter Mba of Enugu State signed into law a bill creating a one-stop shop for tax collection and administration, thereby putting an end to what they refer to multiple taxation in the state. The new law, entitled the Enugu State Internal Revenue Service Establishment and Consolidation of Revenue Administration Law 2025, also grants autonomy to the Enugu State Inland Revenue Service. Speaking at the signing of the bill, Mba described the law as a milestone in his administration's quest to enable the ease of doing business and make Enugu State the premier destination for investment. He noted that the law would consolidate revenue collection, ensuring that each tier of government receives its due share. Mba also explained that the Enugu State Inland Revenue Service would become autonomous with the power to set targets, hire and fire employees. On the other hand, President Bola Tinubu is seeking approval to increase the 2025 budget from 49.7 trillion naira, which he presented to the joint session of the National Assembly on December 18, 2024, to 54.2 trillion naira. Tinubu, according to the request read by the Senate President Godswill Akpabio on Wednesday in Abuja, explained that the increase arose from 1.4 trillion naira additional revenue made by the Federal Inland Revenue Service and 1.2 trillion naira made by the Nigeria Customs Service, 1.8 trillion naira generated by some other government-owned agencies. Now, the President of the Senate consequently directed a request to the Senate Committee on Appropriation for expeditious consideration and declared that the budget consideration would be concluded and passed before the end of this month. Well, we have analysis from an expert to help us deal with these matters arising from both here in Enugu and up there in Abuja. This is the Eastern Eye. I am Alex Obodo. Welcome to the Eastern Eye, a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. Tonight, I'm joined by Professor Chinwe Koba. He's a development economist and Chairman Board of Trustees, Amaka Chinwe Koba Foundation. Thank you so much, Professor Oba, for joining me tonight on the Eastern Eye and for the very first time this year, 2025. Happy New Year, though it's February.
Happy New Year, Happy New Month.
Yes, absolutely. All right. And it looks like you're sporting a new look. I haven't seen you for quite some time, so I guess I'm lucky. I'm meeting you with a new look too. Okay, so let's talk about the Enugu Revenue Law. Were you expecting this to happen with everything, with the projection and the direction the government is headed? Are you surprised that they had to make a law making the Revenue Service autonomous, giving them more powers?
Yeah, I think I am not surprised. Naturally, this is something that should have happened 4 or 5 years ago, or in the last 3 years, if it didn't happen that long, but in the last 3 years, during the SIFTAS reforms program, that should have happened. Actually, part of the grants that most states received under the SIFTAS performance grant was the granting of autonomy to their state's internal revenue service. Unfortunately, Enugu couldn't do that then, so it's commendable that the current administration, ably led by Governor Peter Mba, has been able to do that. It's long overdue that the ERS, is granted autonomy. I think that I commend him for that. I think Enugu is one of the last states to do that. Most states across the Federation has granted their state's internal revenue service autonomy. Full both administrative, financial autonomy, even though for some, despite signing into law the establishment law, have not been able to grant them full administrative and financial autonomy. maybe that is where Enugu State will come first. It's not just about signing the law, but it's more about operationalizing the provisions of the law. I just hope that happens.
All right.
That honestly is commendable.
Okay. So one of the things they cited once the bill was signed was that it will put an end to multiple taxation. The government says it wants to bring it to a central collection, a lot of the taxes that are collected. So talk to us about how this will pan out. As someone who understands a bit of them, not a bit, you understand the numbers, how things flow. Is this, will this tidy up things? Will this clear the path for ease of doing business?
Well, on ease of doing business, yes, it will make things much more better and faster for businesses. But it's also important to recognize, and that is one thing I've also raised when I go across the state to discuss issues like this. Whereas the State House Assembly has the power to enact laws that, that takes care of revenue administration and all that, it's important also to point out that there are constitutional issues which I think the local government may need to, to address by signing of MOU between the state and the local governments. The centralization of revenue collection, as you know, there are revenues under the Constitution that are meant to be collected by the local government. And unfortunately, even by the raising of establishment, enactment of some laws that are already in existence, some of those things have been taken away from the local governments in contravention to the constitutional provisions. But how this will work, and how I have seen it in other states' laws, is that the law will establish what they call Joint State Local Government Revenue Administration Committee, wherein that the states more like what we have at the national level, where they call the Joint Tax Board. Even though for the Joint Tax Bills, the FIRS, in their case, are not collecting all the revenues that are attributable to the state. But in this case, the states, the local government will now transfer their powers of collection, power of accounting to the state, wherein the state will come to the local government, collect revenues that are naturally would have been collected by the local governments, and pay back the ones that are due to the local government after netting out the collection cost. That makes it easier because, first of all, most local governments do not have the capacity to even assess how much more to collect these revenues. But what I'm saying is that whereas it would be good for business, ease of doing business, and for harmonization and consolidation, it's important also that the constitutional issues are also cured by one of those kinds of MOUs that needs to happen between the local governments and the state government as well.
I mean, looking at it, let's talk about multiple taxation, because some people have complained, and vehemently too, that the taxes are too much. In fact, I interviewed the executive chairman of the Enugu State Internal Revenue Service, Mr. Emmanuel Ekene Namani, on our radio program this morning. That's on Afia Radio 99.3. So, and he's saying that they have not introduced any new taxes. Now, what they've merely done is to implement the already existing taxes. But quite a number of people are saying that there are too many taxes. So how do we harmonize the two conversations?
Well, as I said earlier on, initially, local governments come to collect all manner of taxes and rates. They collect tenement rate, they collect business premises, all manner of levies and all that. And at the same time, states will come with their own to collect. Let me give you an instance for the local governments that are in the urban areas. That is the Enugu East, Enugu North, and Enugu South. Those that are in the urban areas. So you find out that the state government may say they have a jurisdiction to collect certain taxes and levies from those areas. and also given the constitutional provisions that grants local government the power to collect certain rates and taxes, local government will still come and collect the same thing. So what that does is that it creates a lot of distortions and also impedes ease of doing business in the state. But by this consolidation, now what it means that those multiple kinds of collections, as it were, will be addressed. I hope that addresses that, wherein the state's inland, the state revenue service comes and collect all manner of taxes and all that, and they share along. But more importantly also, I want to station, yes, what Emma said appears to be the truth, given my level of understanding. I've not seen the state introducing new levies and new taxes and all that since the current administration. But what has happened was that the state began to look at the existing laws and the levies and taxes that those laws created, established, and begin to implement, operationalize. And unfortunately, most of these taxes are not known to the citizens. Proper sensitization were not really done, but these laws are in existence. There was no new taxes or levies that were created by the current administration. There are things that have been existed in the laws. Well, let me make a caveat. It's expected also that over a period of time, and which is what I expect that will happen with the signing of this new law, act into operation, will be that the state internal revenue service will come back to look at the various taxes and levies that are being collected and look at a way to consolidating them. When we talk about consolidation, it means that instead of collecting A, B, C, D, E, C, D, 20 taxes at the same time, you can merge some of them into one and collect them as a single levy or tax. Wherein now you don't impose or give an impression, because what people think is that by collecting 20 multiple tax, various taxes at a time, that's multiple taxation. But in terms of taxation language, that does not constitute either double taxation or multiple taxation, but also remove that ambiguity and issues that are arising from such. It would be nice that the IRS and the state government comes back and look at the various taxes and levies that are currently in place and say, okay, we'll make A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F. In that case, we have lesser number of taxes and levies collectible by the state, even though they all might still be that you subsumed everything into one. But the lesser the numbers, the better the administration, of those taxes become. And also, we need to talk about tax collection efficiency and effectiveness, and that is what consolidation will help them to do as well.
All right. So one of the things say that they now have autonomy; they can hire and fire. Also, that they will now have to set targets. Meaning that they will have to push the limits. How will they do that? Because they will want to generate more money for the government. And how will they do that without squeezing the people, as it were?
Well, when the budget, 2025 budget was read by the governor, and the IGR component was raised so high, I made some comments that didn't go down well with the government then, and the response of feedback I got was that the state government, what they have done is to make sure that the leakages that has existed over the period are closed, are blocked, and they deploy IT that makes it easier now to collect revenues that in the past would have gone into private pockets or not collected at all. So raising certain is normal. Even in the past, there are always targets, and that's why when you come on annual budget, you have revenue projections. Under those revenue projections, you will see the fact, that is the federal allocations and other, you still see the internally generated revenue. So those targets has been there. But what has happened in the last 2 years or 1 year plus that, those targets has been raised, the bar has been raised. And the bar was raised also, and the government, what they did was to deploy IT and also begin to operationalize the levies and taxes that have been in the law that have not been collected. So the idea of targets is not an issue as far as I'm concerned. The other thing also about what this law may help them to do, if they're talking about consolidation and harmonization, part of the argument I made earlier on was that the report that was issued by the State Internal Revenue Service before the budget was read was a different figure from what the governor read. Now, the feedback I got, whether rightly or wrongly, was that the IRS didn't have the entire figure of revenue collected as at that time. And that is also, could be as a result of their inability to be the centralized agency that collects revenue. There may be some MDS then that we are collecting revenue. But now with the new law, what it means that for even MDS that will be collecting revenues for the states, those revenues will be collected not on. They will be collected for the IRS. So they are like the representative of IRS. So when they collect, they pay into a central account being managed by the IRS, the State's Internal Revenue Service. So in that case, it's easier for the revenue agency at a particular time to tell the public and the government how much revenue that has been collected, unlike what happened last year and all that. And I think that's a good thing. That is what autonomy does, because as it stands now, I've not read the law. I don't have a copy of the law. Even the old law, I don't have a copy of it. But what I think will happen, which is what has happened in other states, that the law grants the IRS the power to be the sole agency for assessment, for collection, for accounting, and for reporting of both tax and non-tax revenue in the state. So in that case, now it's easier. When you press the button, you know what has been collected, what is collectible, and what has been assessed. So I think that's a good thing. So with that, it's easier for the government to collect revenues initially that would have been filtered away, and also for those who are evading or avoiding tax, it's easier now to track them. But there are a lot of things that will happen, and that will leave for the State Internal Revenue Service to do. When they do that, what they will do is that they will bring more people into the tax net without necessarily increasing tax rates or introducing new tax. There are a lot of people who are not currently paying tax, even when they are making. In fact, most importantly, let me say to you also that most high net worth individuals rarely pay tax, whether it's pay as you earn, that is personal income tax, whether it's stamp duties, whether it's property tax, a number of tax. The high net worth individuals rarely pay tax. I just showed that with this new tax law, the executive chairman of IRS will have the courage, the political will to set up systems and structures in place that will enable them to track those kinds of individuals and not people like us. Anyway, thank you.
Of course, take a very short break. When we return, we'll talk some more on this, and then we'll switch over to the president's request for the increment of what is. Welcome back to Eastern Eye here on Afia TV, a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. My name is Alex Obodo, and I still have here with me Professor Chumikuba. He's joining me virtually, actually. And we've been talking about, first of all, the Enugu Internal Revenue Service and the other issues around it. Just before we leave the subject, so what outlook does this actually bring for Enugu in terms of, with all the ambitious plans the government has? Is this a pathway to increasing the state's revenue, IGR, like it's been the plan? Is this the right pathway to go? Or do you think there are other things they need to take care of in order to really be on that path?
Yeah, I think first thing first, and that first thing first the state government is doing. The granting of autonomy to the state's internal revenue service is one step. And what that has done is that it will support the harmonization and consolidation of all tax and non-tax revenue that are collectible in the state. And that helps to address the issue of leakages, bringing more persons into the tax net and all that. But beyond that, is what also the governor is doing gradually. I hope more will happen. And that is also doing things that will make Enugu State more business friendly by having good roads, providing water and all that, and electricity, power. Even though since we have the new destiny, I think there seems to be a drop. I just hope that will be addressed. Then the schools that are coming up. There are a lot of things that are required to make sure that the state becomes more competitive for business. Because for now, yes, something is going on, but Enugu State has not gotten to that point where businesses, will come. I'm sure by the time the governor continues what he's doing this year, by next year, we'll see a leap and all that. And also to encourage more businesses, not just by saying you're reducing tax and all that, but also providing them support services, business support services. Those are the things I think the SME Center supposed to be doing beyond the grants and all that they give. Most small businesses don't lack the capacity to even do normal financial management in terms of accounting and all that. And if they're unable to do that, it becomes very difficult for the government also to assess them and all that. So some of the business support services that the state can render may also focus on those small scale enterprises by building their capacity, to do certain things and all that. So when that happens, it becomes easier for the IRS here, I mean the Enugu State Internal Revenue Service now to collect more revenue. Because as it stands now, the pressure, most taxpayers and prospective taxpayers see the push and pull by the IRS as also inhibiting their ability to thrive in their businesses, because the environment is not yet as business friendly as it ought to be. But I think it's a work in progress. We are seeing things that are happening in the state, and I just hope while we are consolidating the IRS through the tax laws, there's need also to consolidate the gains that is being made at the state level in terms of infrastructural provision and all the rest of it. I think that will happen. But there's a lot of sensitization needs to happen with this tax law. Even the old tax law, I have sought for it on many occasions, and I can't find it. I just hope that the new law that was just signed into law will be made available to the citizens. And also proper sensitization needs to happen, to educate the citizens on what is expected of them, because the citizens need to know their rights and obligations the same way they need to know the rights and obligations of IRS. I don't know whether Enugu IRS has their service charter or not. So those are some of the things. Now that we have the law, it is important that further structures and systems needs to be put in place, to reinforce what is ongoing.
Let's shift to the second leg of the conversation tonight. And there's the President Bola Tinubu seeking approval to increase the 2025 budget from 49.7 trillion naira, which he presented to the National Assembly on the 18th of December 2024, to 54.2 trillion naira. Well, he's saying that there are monies that he needs, that he's seen somewhere that will help to bring monies into the budget. Of course, talking about the additional revenues from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, 1.4 trillion. You also have another one, 1.2 trillion, made by the Nigeria Customs Service, and 1.8 trillion generated by some other government agencies. So help us make sense of this. I think this is the first time we're seeing a situation like this. The president is asking for the budget to be increased because he's found monies here and there that can be plowed and dumped in the budget. I don't know whether I'm modeling it up, but just help me. You are the professional.
Anyway, I think it might be the first time the president is increasing the budget he presented before the budget is signed. But it is important that we also recognize, also cast our mind back in retrospect that what has usually happened in the past was that, yes, the president might not send any formal request to the National Assembly to increase the budget. But what we have always seen in the past was that the budget the president sends to the National Assembly is not the same budget that comes out from the National Assembly.
Sure.
The National Assembly on their own, as we know, will always jack up the budget, sometimes to upward of 1 trillion addition and all the rest of it all. So, but what has happened now was that the president, decided to do that based on the report that we had that there was an additional revenue accruable. It's not as though that this revenue is already there. The expected revenue, projected revenue, additional revenue that will come. And based on that, the president is asking the National Assembly that since we're expecting so additional amount of money, we want to increase our budget to so amount before it is approved. So now it's the executive that is making this request, unlike before, where the National Assembly on their own will be the one that will insert things and increase the budget. I just hope that in the end, that the National Assembly, even with this additional 5 trillion naira of that about, they will still increase it more. That's number one. Number two, also we know that there's what is called supplementary budget. What previous administration, even the current administration, used to do is that after the original budget has been approved, within few months, the president, the executive, let me not use the president, the executive will go back to the National Assembly with a supplementary budget. That supplementary budget also sometimes is a result of additional revenue expected, projected revenue, which could be from IGR or which could be from loan. Additional supplementary budget is presented, and most times those budgets are passed. So, yes, I agree with you. This is the first time that the original budget is still being under legislative scrutiny, and the president is, adding more. Unfortunately, in this case, we don't have the details of what the expenditure component of that is taken, that the additional revenue is financing. So maybe we hope after the budget has been approved by the National Assembly and assented to by the president, the details will be made public.
I mean,
even though personally I have my reservations, but I'll wait for you to ask your question before.
I was hoping to actually hear that you have those reservations, because the president of the Senate is saying that they will pass it by the end of this month. So, and we're asking again, is there going to be proper scrutiny of things being thrown at the National Assembly, especially things that concern the public funds, the appropriation of monies? Are they really thinking things through? Are they going through these things with the empirical eyes?
Well, I think these are the questions that will ask the National Assembly, whether they are going through the budget. But in fact, I just want to say something here. Most times we focus at the federal government and talk less about what happened at the subnational level. As you know, most state governors present budget to their state house of assembly, and within 2 weeks, state house of assembly will pass those budget the same way it was presented by the governor. And nobody asks why. How did that happen? What input did the legislator make? Because the executive can send you budget the same way, you turn it out the same way within 2 weeks. So sometimes within a week, the state assembly will approve a state budget. So it's only the National Assembly that goes through the rigor of legislative scrutiny of budgets. Rarely do we see state of assembly do that. Now, but in answering your question, it is left for the National Assembly to tell us whether they have that to do. But IMF recommendation under the accountability framework and other is that the budget should be presented to the legislature at least 3 months to allow them time to go through the budget, do the consultations, public hearings, and all that. So that needs to happen. So, but unfortunately, we don't have the time to do that and all that. But I just hope that National Assembly will be able to do that. The issue is that also, how many of us are interested in what happens at that level? So, even when the budget has been approved and assented to by the governor or president, how many of the citizens take the time to go look at the budget to see what is in that budget and how it will affect their lives? We don't do that. So I just hope National Assembly will be able to do the needful and also, but most importantly, provide legislative oversight by the time this budget has been approved and implementation commences.
All right, so let me take this conversation further. Some people think that this might be a panic movement, that some of this is made in America. That is the new sheriff in town at the White House, and he's sending panic all over the globe with how he's cutting off aids and financial support America has been offering the rest of the world, where they have some connection. So, and they've been cutting off different things the U.S. have been involved in. And do you think that this has got something to do with the current posturing of President Donald Trump? Because even some governments around the world are also changing their policies to reflect the new American ideal.
Well, I think it's not far from it. There's some element of the influence from the Trump syndrome, to it. Because if you remember, just last week or early this week, the president also made an additional 4-point-something billion budget allocation to the health sector to take care of HIV and all the rest of it.
That's right.
So it's not impossible that some of what is happening is also to address those issues that are happening, even though we are discussing budget. But I want to make this also, say this on the air. It's only Nigeria as a nation that gives grants and aids to other countries without trying to influence them. Our foreign diplomacy is not yet very strong. We do things and just go to sleep. America gives you things and they influence things around you. And we have seen the impact. So it's important also that as a country, as we give aid to the countries around us, that we begin to use our soft power to influence things in those areas for the good of Nigeria as well. But be that as it may, there's a possibility that what is happening in America is also influencing what is happening here. But some of the reservations I have with the budget earlier on was that I listened to an argument somebody made earlier in the day where he said that because we have money, we spend it. And he used his company, that if you make more money, you spend it. And while he was talking, I said, I wish I was there with him on air to discuss this matter, because using your company, so what it means is that you go and borrow money to increase salaries for your worker. No real businessman will do that. So for me, that we make more money while we're expecting more revenue is not enough reason, justification, except there are other issues that are not yet in the open to increase the budget, because already we have a very huge budget deficit that is to be funded through borrowing, both domestic and external loans. So if we are making more money, what would have happened would have been to reduce the budget deficit by bringing in that revenue component into the budget without increasing the expenditure component. But the president knows better. He is the one who is sitting up there. He wears the shoe. He knows what he wants to achieve. If he fails, we'll blame him. If he achieves, he takes the credit. But if I am the president, I may have handled that in a different way.
In a different way, and a lot of people are worried, not that the budget is being increased is the problem. It's about the monies being added to the budget, let it reflect in the lives of Nigerians. And the question is it too much to ask for? So if you add 1 trillion, for instance, to the budget, it should reflect on the people. So because the argument is the monies being appropriated isn't reflecting the way people expect it to. And that is the big question. How do we get to the point where if the government decides to add 2 trillion naira or 3 trillion naira to the budget, that the people will be better for it?
You know, this is a chicken and the egg kind of thing. If this same amount, you know, the president decides not to bring it into the budget and still spend it, we won't still know. So for me, now it's in the budget, the citizens have a responsibility because it's transparent. You know, I will tell you those days when you are in the radio, this thing, that whatever thing, you can't demand accountability over something that is not there in the public. Now that the president in his own way has made this thing public, the budget, federal government budget is always there in the public. Unlike most of the state government budget proposal, you won't see it until it is passed. And when it is passed, it takes months before you can even have access to it. There are some states you won't have access to even this. In fact, there are some states, some ministries won't have access to the other ministries' budget. That is that bad. So, but at the federal government level, these documents are made available to everybody to see. So what means that there is transparency to a reasonable extent in the planning. So what we need to do as citizens to make sure that this reflects on us also, because if you look at those budgets, there are capital component of those budgets that says this is what will happen, this is what will happen, this is what happened. I will expect the citizens as a united front to begin to demand accountability on how these funds are being spent. You know, whether individually, whether collectively. But we must ask necessary questions. It's not enough to sit in beer parlors to discuss the issue. We must ask the right questions and asking them at the right time and at the right place. Until that happens, whether they put in more money or they don't put in more money, it doesn't make any sense without demand for accountability.
That's right, but then one would need some kind of expertise, no matter how little, to interpret a budget document. It's not a skill that everyone can really get by just looking at the document. Many people, when you hand them a budget document, they can't interpret the line items there. But these are things people undergo. I'm sure you have undergone. I've been in very many budget tracking sessions and budget tracking capacity building. It's not something that just the man on the street will know if you show them, and they will start interpreting it and asking questions. How do we get to the point where people will know what they ought to do when they look at a budget document?
Number one. You know, our budget for federal government budget is almost 1,000 something or 2,000 something pages. So it's not something you can just grab and you find out everything. Number one. Number two is that for every budget, both at national and state level, subnational level, there's what is called the citizens' budget. That citizens' budget is like a small version of the whole budget, summarized with pictures and all that. So that is easier for a layman to understand, even though you won't get all the details. That's number 1 point. There's also what is called citizens' accountability report. At the end of the year, it's expected by the time the auditor releases the auditor's reports, and there again we'll go, because most auditors' reports are not in the public. They just give the financials without releasing the management letter where they state all the findings and all that. They hide that. That should be a public document. But be that as it may, there's what is called citizens' accountability report that also needs to be produced by the state and the federal government that says this is what we've done with your money. But beyond that, I will expect most of these CSOs or NGOs running about getting funds and all that to also champion this thing on behalf of the people and also do training. There's an organization in Owerri that has now gotten a lot of use in each local government. They got two persons in each local government. In fact, by this year, I think they will go further to ward, each ward to pick one person. What the ritual is that they train them on budget process, on how to track budget and projects and all that. So having trained those people, it's easier for them to get feedback on each of those things and say, what has happened, how is it happening? So I will expect that to happen also, not just from the CSOs, but also from the state government. State government needs also to empower the people to be able to demand accountability, because that's what it is. This is not just about it's government and the people of Nigeria, or government and the people of the state. So it's a collective thing. No single hand can make a noise without the other one clapping on it. So the government needs to train, build capacity of the citizens to be able to ask the right question. But beyond that, people must also show interest. Part of the issue is that lack of interest. The Ethiopian Enoch, when he was reading the Bible, we saw that he was reading before Philip came to ask him, do you understand what you're reading? I said, how can I know if nobody has taught me? People must show interest first. It's only when you show interest that even when you are being trained or your capacity is being built, that you'll be able to understand what is happening. The truth is that most Nigerians, show little or no interest in what happens around them beyond talking. Yes, budget figure. Even if you can't go through the whole budget document, go through the capital expenditure component of the budget. That one will list, you see the details of what will be done and where it will be done. So pick those ones and begin to track them and ask questions. Those ones are easy. Go to the budget, leave personnel, leave overhead, leave all those things. Go to capital expenditure component of the budget. That is where you see projects that will be implemented and how it will be implemented, and use that to begin to ask the right questions.
And one hopes that would happen. And the question is, who will make it happen? As you already know, President Trump has cut off a lot of funding for the groups that used to come here to organize some of those events. So it looks like it's going to be quite an uphill task. So the few people that know how to track and follow the money, that's how they call it, follow the money. Those that can track and follow the money, where do we find them? And how will they step down what they know? We have just a minute or two to go.
Ellis, it's important to know that, yes, Trump has cut off funding. But it's a shame that as a nation, as a state, that would depend on external grants and external support to do what we should do for ourselves. And if you look at it, if you do the analysis, external grants to Nigeria and state at a time is just very, very, very small, less than 10% of the state's budget. Yet, would depend on them to do a manner of things. The state government can, in their budget, put some money for capacity building. Those that are rich in each of the states or country can also devote some funds, to say this is what it should be done to build capacity. We don't need to wait for other people. The money that the U.S. is giving are monies contributed by citizens of the U.S. So we must learn how to also be giving back to the society. That is what it should be. So the part of things we should be doing is to sensitize our people to know that you can't keep taking, you must give back. So, and if you must give back collectively, as individuals, as groups, we can contribute funds, contribute knowledge to begin to build the capacity of others to do what we need to do. Let's not keep depending on America, on foreign donors and others to do what we should do. I don't think that's a good mindset for development, sustainable development.
All right, on that American note, I have to thank you so much, Professor Chimakoba, for your analysis on the Eastern Eye tonight.
Thank you, Elias.
Thank you. And that's the Eastern Eye tonight. Up next is Nka with Jumai Bulama Ashebu. My name is Alex Obodo. Good night.
Yeah.